Hey y'all, it's Krista Watson here from Krista Quilts, back with some more free motion fun. In today's video, we're going to focus on one design called switchbacks, and then I'm going to show you how to change it up. We're also going to do stacked switchbacks and woven switchbacks, plus a bonus tip on how to make this design continuous. So make sure you grab some scrap fabric, maybe a sketch pad, so you can draw this out with me and then stitch it. Be sure to stick around to the end where I have some bonus tips on how you can apply this design to a real full-size quilt. Let's get started. Switchbacks, stacked switchbacks, and woven switchbacks are designs number 78, 79, and 80 in the book. For switchbacks, I'm going to start with the basic U and N shape, and then I'm going to put those together to form a really fun texture design. To make it easier, if I draw out a pair of lines, this is going to represent seam lines on my quilt, and I want to stitch in between. So there's my little U and N shape. I am stitching these up and down as I move sideways across the quilt. Very easy to do when I'm free motion quilting. I can go right to left or I can go the other way. Now it's really good to be able to do this in any direction. So let's say I draw lines and this time I go side to side while I'm moving my way up and down across the quilt. It's the same basic idea, but if you can stitch in both directions, that really makes it helpful. And especially if you want to put these together, it makes a really great border design. So let's say this is your borders on your quilt right here. And let's say you have a little seam. So I can do my little N shapes, my little U's and N's in one direction, and then think about the up or the down stroke when I come along and switch directions to stitch around the border, and I can continue on all sides. Now, another fun way to do this design is to fill in interesting shapes on your quilt. Let's say, for example, I have a chevron shape. I can do it one of two ways. I can either do the U's and N's perpendicular to that, and when I get to the corner, I have to kind of squeeze it in, but that looks kind of cool, so that's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it is draw that chevron shape again, or it could be a square, rectangle, triangle, anything you can think of, and now the U and N is going to go up and down regardless of what the shape looks like. So here's what I mean. Up and down, filling in all the spaces regardless of what it is, but having those seam lines as your guideline to do the basic switchback. And the reason I call it a switchback is because it looks like if you were traversing up a mountain, you would be going back and forth, but it's much more fun to quilt this design than it is to actually do a hike, and it's a lot less stressful and painful. I've drawn some lines on my practice sample, which will represent seam lines on my quilt. So first I'm going to start by quilting the switchbacks up and down while I move from side to side, filling in that horizontal space that I've drawn. I'm trying to quilt smoothly and evenly, but I'm not going to stress out if it doesn't look perfect. Because I'm free motion quilting with a specialty foot and the feed dogs are dropped, I can easily stitch in any direction. Now I'm stitching and moving the sample from side to side as I work my way down from the top to the bottom in the vertical section. So I'm trying to quilt each switchback segment at about the same size and hitting the marked lines as I switch sides and form the design. I'm using my hands as a hoop to stabilize the fabric, and I'm aiming for a smooth, fluid movement as I stitch. So I'm only stitching the area in between my hands so it doesn't feel overwhelming. Once I stitch to the bottom of this vertical section of the design, I want to show you a cool trick to quilt this entire sample continuously. Now you'll see I've switched to another free motion quilting design called stipple. This is going to be in the background area of my block. This creates a custom quilting look without the need to stop and break thread. So be sure to go back to the very beginning of this series and check out episode number 2 where I show you how to quilt stipple. In fact, you can check out the description box of this episode to get the playlist of all the videos that I'm sharing with you. By the time you are done stitching all 99 designs, you're going to be a pro at domestic machine quilting. When I get back to the right-hand side of my chevron shape, I'm going to go ahead and quilt more switchbacks to fill in that chevron design. By using the same thread color, I can change up the designs in different areas of my quilt without having to stop, start, or cut thread. Just remember, practice makes progress when it comes to this design. As I fill in the gaps in this sample with more quilting, it's going to draw up any of that excess fabric and reduce the puffiness of the overall quilt. I'll finish off the last background section with some more stippling for a completely custom quilted block. Here are several variations of switchbacks. They are very versatile to stitch. Now let's say you want to do your switchbacks in a larger area. If you were trying to keep them straight on a large area, that's really hard to do. So instead of doing one ginormous switchback, I'm going to divvy this up into smaller areas of maybe an inch or two, and this can represent seam lines, or maybe I draw in little guidelines. Then I'm going to start in one area and do my little U's and N's all the way to the other side. And then watch the up or the down stroke. I'm just going to go down and do the next set. Now, what I'm not doing is I'm not trying to line these up perfect. And again, you're going to notice my imperfections when I'm using contrasting thread. But as long as I fill in all the texture and then go down to the next one, it's going to look really good. So as you're doing this on a quilt, you might want to think ahead of time where you want your design to go. For example, I started here at point 1 and I finished at point 2, but if for some reason I need to get back over to point 3, then I'm just going to stitch in the ditch all the way and keep on going. So that is stacked switchbacks. Now let me show you a fun variation that I like to call woven switchbacks. Let me kind of erase all of this on my little iPad here. What I can do is with this same area, let's say this is a little 4-patch design instead. Maybe each 4-patch is 2 inches. I'm going to do some woven switchbacks. I'm going to go up and down in one direction, and then when I get to the other side, I'm going to switch, and I'm not trying to count how many of these I'm doing. I'm just trying to make it nice and even, and then I'm going to switch up and down again. Again, a little bit messy, but it's a really fun textural design. So that's what it looks like on a 4-patch. Now let me draw out a little 9-patch for you and show you how you could continue. You could do this on a checkerboard or a scrappy quilt. So again, let's just pretend that we've got 9 of them. And again, just pretend that these lines are all nice and straight. I'm kind of doing this freehand. So I can start on the top at point 1 or point 2 or anywhere on the quilt. You'd want to draw this out ahead of time to get it all worked out. I'm going to end on the upstroke, go over side to side, come over, up again. And again, if I'm stitching on top of a line or it gets a little messy and I'm using a thread that blends, it's going to be much less noticeable. In a minute, you're going to see me stitch the sample with contrasting thread. And again, you're going to see the messiness. But notice that if I was stitching with like a light gray thread on white fabric or a tan or a nice neutral, it would blend in very nicely. And again, I get to the end, I've actually ended on one side, and then I can just stitch back to in the ditch to get to point 2, or let's say I want to go somewhere else, I can just keep on going. I've drawn out some more squares and rectangles on my sample to represent the seam lines on my quilt so that I can show you a fun way that you can take these switchbacks and bend them to fill in interesting areas on your quilt. So I'm either going to use the seam lines that are already there on my quilt, or I'll mark some of my own to use as guidelines to stitch in between. Just like in my previous sample, I'm stitching the switchback lines up and down. But notice what happens when I get to the end of one little section. I want the design to end up on the downstroke so that I can move to the row beneath it and continue quilting the same design. I'm not trying to make the switchbacks line up, but I am trying to fill in the space as evenly as I can. And then when I get to the next section, I want to fill it in as well. You can divide up your square or any section as many times as you want to quilt as many rows of switchbacks as you need to. And rather than quilting one large row of ginormous switchbacks, on this sample I quilted 3 rows to fill in all the space. Now I'm going to quilt woven switchbacks in a smaller area. This can take some practice to map it all out ahead of time, but if you draw it out on paper first, you can create an easy to follow quilting plan. The nice thing about free motion quilting is that you can stitch in any direction. However, it's difficult to quilt a very large motif without marking, so these guidelines really help. To make this woven pattern interesting, I'm switching directions as I quilt each square section. So I'm not trying to quilt the same number of lines in each area, but I am paying attention to where I need to bend the design so that I can change directions. Now, if for some reason the design ends up on the opposite side of where I need to go, I'll just stitch in the ditch to get back to where I need to be. Easy peasy. I'll finish quilting these smaller areas of woven switchbacks to fill in this entire block with lots of yummy texture. Here are my stacked and woven switchbacks together. They can be combined in the same quilt. I sure love quilting switchbacks. In fact, it's one of my favorite go-to designs when I'm custom quilting a quilt. That's exactly what I did on this quilt behind me called Facets. It's one of the patterns in the first book I ever wrote called Machine Quilting with Style. Although the book itself is out of print, you can still get a PDF download, which is going to give you step-by-step instructions to make this quilt along with a machine quilting plan. You can also learn lots of fun designs in that book as well. Now what I did is I combined the switchbacks along with swirls, which is one of the designs that we learned back in episode 25. If you really like combining designs, be sure to check out another quilt I've made called Charming Chevrons. In this pattern, I've taken the switchbacks and combined them with a walking foot quilting design called Walking Foot Wavy Lines. Go all the way back to episode 1 to see how to do that one. My hope with this series is I'm going to teach you a lot of fun designs that you can mix and match to truly make quilts your own. Be sure to check out the description box for links to everything I mentioned, lots of bonus videos, and you can leave a comment or ask me any questions at any time. I hope you're enjoying this series. I'll see you in the next one.